And yo, the Sports Bag Bros podcast is back at you after another week of sports. But this time it wasn't just any weekend of sports. College football is in full swing. Yes, the NFL is coming up this week, and we'll talk about that either today or even on the day of the NFL opening up on Thursday with a doubleheader. But it's all about college football this time around. We got off the air last Thursday. College football really started swinging last Saturday and even yesterday on Sunday. And today, Florida State taking on Boston College. A huge weekend. A lot of talk on college football. A lot of things you might like, might not like, but a lot of things had happened. Just simply things. What's up?
What's up? Yeah, had some pretty good matchups over the weekend. Georgia handled business, even won more easily than I expected. I said 3 scores, and it wasn't. I don't think the game was ever in doubt.
Never.
It was just total domination. And I mentioned they might come out with a chip on their shoulder. They felt they deserved a spot in the playoff last year, and they didn't get it. And who knows? They might have that tunnel vision. Notre Dame came through for me, beat Texas A&M and Trav Albert School.
Tough game. Yeah,
I didn't get to watch it, but I did see the score. So thank you, Notre Dame.
Trav the traitor. But, going back to that Georgia game, going into the game, we talked about it a few times when we talked about Carson Beck being a leading Heisman Trophy candidate. I guess when you look at the numbers in terms of who's betting what, it's Carson Beck, number 2, Dylan Gabriel, who's now in Oregon at number 1. But regardless, Carson Beck, even though they got the win, even though it was pretty dominant on the winning side, man, I don't want to nitpick, but he did okay. I thought he had to do more than okay. But to their credit, with him just doing okay, maybe in my eyes and maybe even other Georgia fans' eyes or people who just watch college football, the team was still dominant. And one thing that stood out more than anything outside of Carson Beck not having that exponential improvement that I wanted instead of the incremental, because he needs it as a fifth-year senior, was their offensive line with 4 returning starters having so many issues in the beginning, at least getting the running game going. And it would have really helped out Carson Beck. I guess he needs all of that. But as we talked about last week, when you're that guy at quarterback, if you're that special person that they're talking about a Heisman, and to himself, they talked about in the pregame show how he looked at himself as a first-round draft pick, wanted to get the Heisman, wanted to win a national championship. You got to be able to take over 2, and whatever ordinary receivers you may have until you find out otherwise, you have to make do with them and make them stars. He didn't do any of that. The running game was slow to start. It finally did start. Frazier did very well. Trevor Etienne did not play in the game, so heading into this game, we talked about it last week. The DUI back in March really affected whether he was going to start or not. He didn't, so I guess he will play a little bit against Tennessee Tech this upcoming weekend. But Dabo Swinney is more of a story. I think even more than what we saw in the game. We're talking about, hey, the transfer portal. He needs to get on board.
I heard some noise. Clemson fans not happy. I don't know how safe his job is going to be.
And that's tough for a guy like him to be able to have his job on the line. And it might be for something outside of X's and O's. It's coming down to the transfer portal for him, in my opinion. I think he still wants to go into people's living rooms when he goes to these recruits' house. He wants to be able to tell the parents or the guardian, whoever's there, that we're not going to throw your kid away because he might not be good enough at the time. We'll sit around and wait for him. We're not going to bring somebody in from another school to kick him out. If he does lose his job, it will be from a fellow recruit that has come in, worked his way in, and the better man won. He wants to be able to say that and get the trust of the family or the guardian, the members. But, hey, he doesn't have to go wholesale when it comes down to the transfer portal. He just has to bring in a handful of real key cherry-picked players in order to make his program good, because he does have good talent. He just needs that added and preservatives to become that talent that the other blue-chip teams are.
Yeah, fill a couple gaps in the roster. But getting back to Carson Beck, you might be being a little harsh on him. The game was hardly ever in doubt, once they started rolling. And were they really asking him to do much? You don't want to be taking chances, throwing pick sixes and letting Clemson get back into the game. So, I'm sure they didn't open the playbook. I don't think they were trying to do all that much. The game was in hand. Hey, let's just get out of here. We'll move on to the next one, and you don't want to give your future opponents more tape on you. So I'm sure they didn't open the playbook. So he probably wasn't asked to do too much.
Well, to start off, playing against Clemson, this is a big-time team. It is an ACC team, a team that's won championships in recent memory, at least. They haven't won it recently, like right now, but they're still a pretty formidable team. Georgia still doesn't necessarily know what they have because they did lose players last season on offense and defense. Now, the defense really stood out. Now, a quarterback like Carson Beck, I think because you are a fifth-year senior, the book is wide open for you. You already know the book. It's not a matter of them holding you back or holding the book back. They're letting you go out there doing what you need to do, doing what you know how to do, and it wasn't looking as smooth as I thought it would be. Although he did have some receivers out there, some new players to get used to. Colby Young from Miami, who we've spoken about last week, 6'3", 215 pounds. Not a very fast player, not a speed demon kind of player, but definitely that possession guy who ended up making the touchdown in the red zone with a possession kind of touchdown. Big body, posted up, made the catch, got it to the end zone, made the touchdown. And then you look at another player they had gotten, London Humphreys from Vanderbilt. When you can cherry pick a player, even a team like Vanderbilt can have a good player. London Humphreys is that player, fast as hell. In my opinion, from what I see on the field, even faster last year than Lat McConkey was. So I think that this is a play that's really going to be something for them. But we spoke about a couple of the other plays they had, but that defense is certainly going to lead the way. This defense, at least in the beginning and a lot of parts of the game, reminded me a few times of back in 2022 when they had that team that had 15 players going into the draft and 5 of those players going in the first round.
Yeah, there could be a lot of similarities, but I'm thinking, once they're up 3 scores and you mentioned the defense, they know they have that defense and they got Clemson under control. There's no reason to take chances. Like I said, just let's win this one, move on to the next. And it's not that Carson Beck doesn't know the playbook. I'm saying I don't think they opened up the playbook. There was no reason to. They had the game in hand. They were dominating. They didn't need to score 70 points on Clemson.
Yeah, and it took a little while for them to get the kinks out. Like all teams having their first game, you're expecting a lot of mistakes, especially penalties. You're expecting a couple of breakdowns, and it didn't happen like that, but it did take them a little while to finally get in sync, especially on the offensive line with 4 returning starters, especially with Georgia, who's known to run the ball very well regardless of who's been there, and that's been for several decades, not even from just this year or recently. It's been decades for Georgia when it comes down to running the ball. 4 returning starters on that offensive line didn't really get into sync until a little bit later. Then they started chipping away down the field. But this week, football-wise, we got our first real look at the new landscape of college football, the geography that doesn't make sense. A new Big Ten, a new SEC, even a new Big 12, because Arizona and Arizona State are in the Big 12 as well. So we just have whatever you're going to school for, don't go for geography because it doesn't matter anymore. You're going to fail. The West Coast does not belong in the Midwest, and it damn sure doesn't belong in the East. California coming to the East Coast because they used to be in the Pac-12. Now they're in the ACC. It's insane. But looking at that landscape, the SEC had 16 teams play this past weekend, starting on Thursday, moving forward until now. 16 teams went a very good 14-2. But what's more important is the margin of victory in which some of these teams had absolutely obliterated their opposition. We know it's a bunch of cupcakes, but the opposition was absolutely obliterated. It seems like everyone was trying to make a statement, even though these small teams aren't teams you want to make a statement with. But 6 shutouts out of those 16 teams that played to the tune of 416 points to 0. Shutouts. That's what they did.
Yeah, that's domination. Unfortunately for LSU, they weren't one of those teams, though. And I don't know what's up with Brian Kelly. Man, Brian Kelly's getting scorched for going off on his players. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. I watched Brian Kelly, and I watched the game yesterday, and Garrett Nussmeier should have had more opportunities to throw the ball. there was times because they weren't running the ball effectively, they wanted to run the ball just to prove they could run the ball. When he was throwing pretty effectively, was very efficient, was getting nice yards per throw, and was looking like he was in sync. But then they want to run the ball because they want to prove they can run the ball. I think they could have won it passing even a lot more and being even more predictable because he has a good handle of that offense. And it looked like that may have been the case, but they didn't. Well, Brian Kelly decides he wants to run the ball the way he did. And you know, at the end, there was an interception, but that was an absolute garbage time interception at the end of the game. But he threw for 304 yards, had his 2 touchdowns, that one lame interception, but looked very good in between time, getting the ball out there. But at the same time, Miller Moss, another one of these incumbent players that's very rare in college football these days, stayed behind, waited his turn. Now he's starting, had a pretty good game, didn't get the touchdowns you would have expected, but they got the win. The one touchdown they needed to win the game, he threw the touchdown. 378 yards on the day. Garrett Nussmeier was done a disservice, and Brian Kelly deserves his overratedness, and he deserves to be scored.
Yeah, I know he's frustrated, but he's got to control his words better than that, man. You can't. Week 1, you just go in on your team and throw everybody under the bus. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't bode well for the rest of the season. I don't think. The younger players nowadays, I don't think they take kindly to those type of attacks.
Oh, absolutely not. Mm-mm.
So, hey, good luck to you, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, the young players today forget about it, man. That's the reason why the transfer portal has so many people in it, because maybe a coach just said, hey, well, you can't play this year. Maybe next year. They're like, nope, I'm out. Or, man, you made a bad throw. That's why you're not starting. Well, I'm out. That's how they are these days. But, yeah, Brian Kelly has been known for that kind of attitude, being at Notre Dame and now being over here. I don't know how his attitude was at Cincinnati. I guess the ego was a lot smaller then, but the bigger the school, the bigger the ego. And now he's at LSU, and the ego is still there, and the anger is still there, and he can't keep his brain and his mouth on the same page. But nevertheless, they lost the game. I thought they should have won it, and I think it's all on him, but he's throwing everybody under the bus, so apparently he doesn't think so. But that gives us a chance to move forward to the other SEC team that lost, which was the Florida Gators, who I thought would win by 10 or more. Well, I didn't mean that much more. Maybe 10, 12, 15, maybe. The absolute blowout it turned out to be 41-17, and it wasn't even that close. If not for a 71-yard busted play jaunt from the outside, it still counts. But this Miami team looks a lot different than previous Miami teams that you would get hyped up about, thinking the Kings are back, the Kings are back. Knowing damn well in the back of your mind they weren't really back. You just happened to win that game. The Texas A&M game last year, the game this year on the road in Gainesville, in the swamp with that crowd and all of just what it all brings, bro. I mean, Billy Napier is definitely on the hot seat himself. He may not even get to Tallahassee for Florida State at the end of the season, depending on the rest of this season, with allegedly the hardest schedule in college football this year, which we do not know until the games are played. They're still basing everything off of last year. But Miami looks legitimate. Just one game, but damn, I was even shocked with this, especially with Cam Ward.
Right. I think it was a really, really good performance by the Hurricanes going into Gainesville, coming out with the dominant victory like that. I mentioned the interview clip that I saw of Cam Ward last week, speaking to his confidence, and they performed. They went in there, they handled business. We'll see if they're back. We can't get too excited over one game, but, it is sort of a rivalry, all them Florida boys going against each other, whether or not the schools play each other often, the guys see each other or have seen each other, throughout the years. So that's a good start for the Hurricanes and a big win for them, to kick the season off.
Yeah, man, because like I said, I didn't know too much about Cam Ward. I saw a lot of highlights on him at Washington State. Who watches West Coast games? And if you're not watching Washington State, you look at USC, Washington, Oregon, even UCLA. But you're not typically looking for Washington State unless there's something quirky going on, like a Mike Leach kind of offense that makes it a little more interesting. But he came in, other than that sidearm throwing that's killing me every time he does it, man, he did everything right. 385 yards, 3 touchdowns. That one ill-advised across the body pass that he threw for an interception. I hope there's not a lot more of that in the future. But at the same time, the calmness he has, for the exuberance you talk about when you're saying that he's confident in himself, but then the way he plays, it's like it reminded me a bit of Charlie Ward years ago, when Charlie Ward would just sit in the pocket and all the walls are falling down and he's like, nothing's happening, and he will calmly deliver the ball and it gets, it's completed. This is what I saw. And also running out of bounds. He doesn't really hustle to getting out of bounds. He slows down very slow. I think he needs to stop that as well. But definitely, if you needed to take something out of this, Cam Ward, the Canes, Xavier Restrepo, the Canes did it defensively without Ruben Bain, who was hurt on the first drive with a tissue injury, which is, I think, a calf. So he's not going to play next week against FAMU. He may not have to play the following week against Ball State. So he may get some much-needed rest just to make sure he's completely healthy. The offensive line absolutely dominated. The defense is all over the place. The secondary, which is a weakness but has talent, showed they can hang. Now, it's either that or the Gators really are that freaking bad. That's
Only
the other
time will tell. Only time will tell.
Yeah, and one thing I want to talk about, sticking with the SEC for a little bit, is the game that I thought would be a pretty interesting game. I should have mentioned it last Thursday when we talked about it, but Vanderbilt playing Virginia Tech. I was like, I think Vandy could win this game, but I don't know for sure. But then I checked the roster and something I saw that I didn't know before made me take Vandy. Diego Pavia, the dude I've been talking about from New Mexico State last year and the year before. He's on Vandy's team. He's the sole reason why I took Vandy. And they freaking won in overtime. Diego Pavia, man. I don't know if he'll ever see the light of day on an NFL team because he's only 6 feet. And, he's like a little pudgy, but shoot. If you ever heard of a gamer, he's a freaking gamer.
Yeah, I've never watched a Vanderbilt game. I have no interest in them. I have no idea. I don't even know what the score was. I have no clue.
34-27. But Diego Pavia was the reason. Watching him play at New Mexico State, I know we talked about him on the show before, last season. And even before that, I still followed him because I was like, yo, you can look at his stat line. You're like, yo, New Mexico State is terrible. How's this little dude doing this? And then you watch the game, you're like, yo, bro, you become a fan. He's running around like Fran Tarkenton and just throwing the ball, and he has an overmatched team, but he's giving them every opportunity to win games. But then, man, I mean, that's something I just wanted to mention. Diego Pavia, I'm not saying that Vanderbilt's going to do something extraordinary this year, but I'd like to see at least in a game against a team like Virginia Tech, who we still don't know whether it's good or not. We'll get to see as the season goes on, but a win for them nonetheless at home when they were underdogs at home. And then Tennessee, another team. If you're talking about spectacular players, what's that kid? Nico Lamalieva playing quarterback for.
Don't ask me to say it.
Out of all the quarterbacks and players I'm seeing lists, and we talked about the list last week of quarterbacks or players who are in the Heisman run. He needs to be on the Heisman run. Even though it was a lame team and Tennessee just blew them out, you can still see the talent that should translate even against the best teams. He came in last season. He played in the bowl game. He won the bowl game, got the MVP there. I think talent-wise, he's in the top 3 in the country, especially at his position of being a quarterback right now. And the more the season goes on, I think the more the nation is going to realize how good this guy is. Definitely someone to keep an eye out on. 314 yards, 3 touchdowns this past weekend. Definitely a dominant player. But then now what we do? Go to the Big Ten because there's Big Ten football out there. That's your area. It started off last Thursday only because Rutgers ended up playing a pretty meaningless game. But for me, the more interesting thing was Kyle Managai, the running back for Rutgers, who actually is the leading rusher in the Big Ten going into this season, doing a lot of what he did last season. 165 yards, averaged over 8 yards a carry in this game, and he started it off. But the rest of the Big Ten, Iowa, even though another bad team in Illinois State, Iowa shut them out 40-0. Last season, Iowa was all defense, and their offense was absolutely ridiculous. Cade McNamara is back now. He was injured last season, came out of Michigan, came to Iowa, give them somewhat of an offense. They're able to put up some points. They're going to play Iowa State this upcoming weekend, and we're going to see how good they really are because that team is – you take the under, by the way. when those two play because it's like the under every freaking time, and the Vegas tries to get lower and lower, but they keep going under and under. But then your boys, Nebraska, bro, that's Nebraska. We're talking the number one quarterback going into this, coming out of high school, going into this season,
freshman,
getting the job, starting Dylan Raiola, pretty much Husker royalty, getting his opportunity and winning the game as a true freshman. I don't think people understand how difficult it is for a true freshman at quarterback to play anybody in college football, let alone a fellow Division 1A team, even if it's UTEP.
Right. He was 19 for 27, had a couple touchdown passes, had another one. I think it would have been like a 45 or 50-yard strike. It wasn't a perfect pass, but when the guy dove for it, went right through his arms. It could have been caught. I'm not going to say it should have been caught because he did dive for it, but he could have had 3. I really don't see, what is there to complain about. You mentioned you were in some Husker pages and they were complaining about him throwing into double coverage or doing this or that. 19 for 27, 2 scores, sitting out the second half. I mean, what is there to complain about? Freshman making his first start in college. Is every pass going to be perfect? Is every decision going to be perfect? Of course not. So I think he played. I don't know if certain fans have too much expectations because they haven't had a number one recruit in so long. But that last number one recruit that I could think of was Tommy Frazier. And even Tommy Frazier didn't start as a freshman.
Exactly. This guy is starting as a true freshman, and he's throwing the ball forward as a quarterback. And, they did say he was the highest ranked, I don't know, quarterback because overall player, maybe not. Because I think Jeremiah Smith might have been the number one player overall. But in any event,
well, I mean, it's close enough. They, just call him number one.
Exactly.
They haven't had nobody in the top 10 in years.
But when they mentioned that before, I was thinking about other players that they did have because they said the modern era. Now, where does the modern era begin? And I thought about D'Angelo Evans. He was also a top pick or a top.
I think it's since one of the recruiting services, since they started tracking.
Okay,
it might have been like
Evans, man.
2002 or whatever year it was. That's when they started it.
All right, because I thought about D'Angelo Evans right away, but it was like it kind of threw me aback a little bit when they mentioned the highest player in recent memory, period in their history, in modern history. And I thought about D'Angelo Evans, who was an excellent player, came out of Wichita Collegiate High School, phenomenal numbers. He just could not stay healthy. They made so many comparisons to he and Barry Sanders, both coming from Kansas, both in Wichita, and he looked like he was trying to live up to expectations. I know even the stories of he was able to dunk since he was 12 years old, and he comes into Nebraska as the finished product at 5'8", and you're wondering how the hell tall was he at freaking 12? 5 foot tall, just dunking or what? But anyways, those are the kind of, that was what I was thinking about. But nevertheless, Nebraska definitely started off on the right foot. It looks like from now, even though you don't want to use one game, but when it comes to a true freshman, I mean, it could be hit or miss from game to game. But, man, if you're starting somewhere, I would like to be at this starting point as opposed to coming off of a 3 or 4 interception game going into another game, even at home against Colorado coming in.
No doubt. You mentioned Colorado. I think my biggest takeaway from this game versus UTEP, they won 40-7. Some fans are saying they could have put up 50 or 60 if they had left the starters in longer. What's the point? Get your second stringers in there, third stringers, your walk-ons. And I haven't seen third stringers and walk-ons on the field watching the Nebraska game. I don't know. It must be at least 15 to 20 years. Like, I mean, you got to develop your younger players. If the game's already in hand, why? There's no reason to run it up. Develop your younger players. So, shout out to Coach Rule doing the right thing, and that gives Colorado less tape to go over.
Yep, especially with a rookie. I mean, a true freshman quarterback coming in. Colorado, on their other hand, had their own problems with Division I AA or FCS team, North Dakota State. I mean, let's not forget North Dakota State was a has a very good program on that level of football, but it's still not a Division 1A team, and it also isn't getting the players that Colorado is getting, that Deion Sanders is getting, Coach Prime is getting from all of these other top schools. This hodgepodge of talent that came in this season, a little over 50 as opposed to last year, it was over 80. They still struggled a bit against the North Carolina State, but North Dakota State team, a team that went 11-4 last year. I think they had 27 returning seniors coming to this game, playing in Colorado, Folsom Field. This is supposed to be a hell of an advantage. Some of the little things you still saw remnants of from last year's team, with Colorado still having problems running the football. Only, I think, 56 yards rushing on the day. The only other side that looked better than from last year, there weren't sacks. There was only one sack in the game against them.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. Travis Hunter is a problem.
Oh, he's serious.
But it looked like Colorado's defense had taken control of the game in the second half. Colorado put up a couple of scores. They had pushed the lead out to 10. And, man, they came within 2 to 3 yards of losing that game on the very last play. That was crazy.
See, now this is when you start questioning the coaching. Now the hype machine is over, and I know people really want to get a reason to go after Coach Prime. I think he gives them reasons in their opinion. But, by the way, this game had over 4 million people who watched. So I know they were taking shots at Paul Feinbaum, but they was talking about how he said it was kind of a thing of the past, what was going on with Deion Sanders or Coach Prime. Apparently not. People still have that interest, but now with those eyeballs on it, they're not just enamored with the aura of Coach Prime. They want to see some coaching, and for the people who are fans and want to see him succeed, they need to see coaching and they need to see results, which happens with wins and losses, not just getting by, especially at home. Now, Shedeur Sanders had an excellent day, 40 to 45 yards, threw 4 touchdowns, threw a pick. But then you look at the team again, North Dakota State. Do you really use that as a gauge or what? North Dakota State still had 157 yards rushing. Another problem that Colorado had last year, not being able to stop the run.
Yeah, this game coming up, Nebraska and Colorado, I think that'll give us answers, obviously, on both schools.
I think, absolutely. I think so. This early, right on time. And this time, Colorado has to come into Lincoln in order to get it done. I think this crowd is going to be really ready for it.
But you mentioned lists earlier, and when you mentioned that, I was going to ask you. I can't remember who tweeted it, but somebody predicted Shedeur would be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. What do you think about that?
I don't see that right now, but hey, if you're talking about starting off on the right foot in terms of numbers, because regardless of the team you play, you still go out there and play. You put up the numbers that you have to put up. You go and do what's expected of him. He was expected to put up numbers that prove that he's a first-round draft pick, let alone number 1 overall. He puts up 445 yards. I mean, he did it. I remember years ago when David Klinger was supposedly going into the NFL draft and was going to be looked at as a Heisman Trophy candidate, and I think it was Louisiana Tech or some team like that. He threw like 7 touchdowns. Everybody thought all of this and how great he was. He had like 500 yards or so, and then the next week got blown up by Miami. And then you never heard of him again until the draft when the Bengals made the mistake of taking him. So, but I think that right now it looks like he's on that trajectory of doing something in the first round. I think we need a few more games against quality teams and seeing how he responds against those quality teams. Because for me, I said it last week, I still can't help but think about his troubles that he had against South Carolina State at the HBCU or North Carolina Central at the HBCU. He couldn't solve those puzzles, and now he's with Colorado with more talent around him. And when it comes to the quality teams, he's still not getting the results. Different time, different season, maybe another year experience at this faster level, maybe he gets it done. But yeah, I think first round is a real possibility. Number 1 pick overall. Is a quarterback really going to be number 1 this year, period, out of all the quarterbacks we've seen? I mean, that are out there.
I mean, a lot of things still to be determined. Who gets the number 1 pick, and someone, do they trade down because they don't want a quarterback, or a lot of things. And the NFL season hasn't even started yet, so it's hard to predict. It's hard to project, but we'll see.
Yeah, but staying in the Big Ten, what do you think about Michigan? I mean, you might have not have watched the game, but going into the game or going into the season, I mean, someone had to think about them. They are the defending champions, and we know that it wouldn't be reasonable to think they were going to repeat based on what they've lost, especially your head coach and then your starting quarterback, and then you had a Blake Corum as your running back. I mean, Donovan Edwards is back, but the last time I saw, he was averaging like a half a yard a carry until it got a little better, and they struggled a bit against Fresno State. Not that Fresno State is a bad team, but Michigan, you have Texas this upcoming weekend. The way that game looked was not good, and they'll have their hands full next week against Texas. I think Texas should win, even in the big house, but Michigan definitely just winning 30-10 with Davis Warren as your quarterback throwing for 118 yards. That's not going to do it.
Yeah, they need to improve a great deal with the Longhorns coming to town. But they say, teams usually make their biggest improvements from week 1 to week 2.
Yeah,
we'll see. But they're going to have to improve quite a bit. But
Bro,
when you look at what they're missing from last year, and you mentioned them, they lost a lot of weapons. They lost their head coach. We'll see. It's going to be hard to repeat that act. And, now they have the target on their back, and they have to replace these players and their coach, and it's a big time task.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a hell of a damn task. But then I think this is the year that Ryan Day is going to finally get his bit of a reprieve and some revenge, because this is the year he should beat Michigan. I think that Ohio State is good enough, even though they have their own thing going at quarterback right now. You know what? If I had to do a futures bet and I had to do it with those two teams, I'm going with Ohio State this year, just based on all of the players and just the overall circumstances of what's going on at Michigan right now. But Ohio State, they also won. They got their blowout against Akron, in-state team. Akron isn't any good, another MAC team. But 52-6, Will Howard coming from Kansas State, going to Ohio State. Now their quarterback, not really blowing the doors off the hinges. Kyle McCord was the quarterback last year. Now he's in Syracuse, got himself a win in Syracuse. But Ohio State, I think you're talking Will Howard coming from Kansas State and being the reason why Ohio State should win this year, because they need that stability at quarterback. But then a true freshman, Jeremiah Smith, he's everything they thought he would be, which is not as hard as quarterback, but as a wide receiver where you could be a bit more physical. He's showing up. He's absolutely phenomenal. That's the guy I wanted for the Canes last year, the number 1 wide receiver coming out of high school. And after he didn't sign with the Canes, I hope that he wasn't going to be as good as advertised, and he's as good as advertised. We actually got his partner, JoJo Trader. They both played for Chaminade Madonna High School in Hollywood, Florida, went undefeated last year, blew out of everybody. This year, they don't have the same team. Obviously, those two guys leave your team. It's going to be a different team. That's why they lost to John Bosco last week against, from California when they played down there. But that guy, you talking about getting hyped like a Heisman Trophy candidate. Who I don't want to put it on him right now, but we already see this is the first round of waiting to happen, and early first round of waiting to happen, even though it'll take 3 years before he does
it. Well, they lost Marvin Harrison, and they've been producing some really good wide receivers in the recent past. Olave and those guys. It looks like he could be next in line.
Coming down, man, it just kills me how Ohio State, they have good football of their own up there. But they come down to Florida and steal these freaking players, take them out of from Miami. First of all, they're closer to Miami than they are to Florida State. But even coming from FIU, FAU, Bethune-Cookman, Fairview, Florida State, South Florida, all these teams can't hang on to these types of players. They just come and take them. The top wide receiver in the country, this should have been somebody that at least Miami, Florida State had a shot at. They take him. He's up there. It seems like every time there's like a phenomenal player down here, Ohio State takes him. The Bosa brothers, same story, same high school. They leave here, go up there. They've been doing it for years, stealing freaking Floridians and just getting it done. I'm not going to say Denard Robinson, he's a Michigan guy, but they did the same Michigan. Come down here stealing players. But they got it this time. So if Will Howard can play the way that he's supposed to play with better talent, Ohio State's certainly going to be in the mix.
Like what I mentioned, Olave and Harrison Jr. and the guys they've been producing, you go into a wide receiver's living room and you can run those names off. Yep. I'm sure that has a great impact.
Absolutely. And I knew that when Marvin Harrison came to Ohio State, it was a package deal between he and Kyle McCord, as they were both high school teammates in New Jersey. And so it was a package deal. So it's no surprise that when Kyle McCord knew he probably didn't have the job etched down because Devin Brown was on his backside back then, he decided to get out when he knew he couldn't get a solid answer of, am I going to go into Kep as the number one, or do I still have to fight for my job? Apparently, he had to fight for his job. He decided to fight somewhere else where it was easier. That's why he's in Syracuse. But back to the wide receivers, Jeremiah Smith coming to Ohio State, watching that freak of nature run the ball or play the ball. He did everything anyway, so it wasn't like he just can catch the ball. He could run after the catch the whole nine. But, man, the Big Ten expanding and doing what they had done, the geography doesn't matter anymore, and it also certainly doesn't matter for Oregon, as Oregon had trouble with Idaho, 24-14. Dylan Gabriel, man, I mean, he was at UCF, then he was at Oklahoma, now he's up there. This is the musical chairs we have. He's in Oregon now, and 24-14, I mean, he had 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you look at the stat sheet, you say, okay, they absolutely dominated, but what's up with that end result? This is an Idaho team that was 1A before, couldn't hang, went down to 1AA. They were in 1AA before when Doug Nussmeier, Garrett Nussmeier's father, was there. They moved up, then they went back down, and they had problems with them. Some people say don't read into it, but man, when you see
how can you not? How can you not?
Exactly. Don't read into it. Don't worry about it. It's a throwaway game. When you look at these other SEC teams or other teams just absolutely obliterating the team they're supposed to obliterate, scoring 70 points and 60 points and 50 some odd points, you want to see kind of sort of the same. And they didn't do it. As the number 3 team in the country, you expected something like that with this kind of a quarterback who's supposed to be perfect in Dan Lanning's system. And this is what you get. And that's, I'm not going to call it disappointing. It's worrisome if you're an Oregon fan, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would not be happy with that 24-14. You expected a wider gap, a wider margin, and 24-14 leads people to believe they were in the game. Yeah, and you would think they wouldn't have been.
Yeah, and against better teams. Now what happens? This is the Austin Stadium. By the way, I was going to go to Austin Stadium, but a change of all these plans kind of changed that. I wanted to go for the Ohio State game, but that won't happen this year. But I'll be going to other games, especially down to Miami for the Florida State game, which may not be as important as the time goes on because it looks like with Florida State's loss, they should beat Boston College today, which they're playing. And they may have issues then. Look at the issues they had last year in Boston, in Chestnut Hill. It took a whole bunch of bad penalties and a bad penalty at the end just to squeak out that win. But they're in Tallahassee now. We'll get to see what DJ is going to do or how good DJ really is, which I don't believe he's that good at all. But anyways, another story for probably next week is that we'll probably talk about this once they want to lose this game.
But the Seminoles need to bounce back.
Oh, definitely. They need to. But I wonder if the quarterback you have isn't the guy, how do you come back? I mean, how do you really do anything even against a lesser team? Georgia Tech was supposed to be that lesser team, and they couldn't do it. Now, it was overseas, but both teams were coming from overseas. It wasn't like one was there and the other one wasn't. So they were on the same keel, neutral site, same element. But as far as big performances this past weekend, what was it? Ashton Genty from Boise State, 267 yards, 6 touchdowns in one game. I think just as important, 13.4 yards per carry. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
No matter how you look at it, you look at all these touchdowns, you think about, I think Robert Griffin from Illinois had a whole bunch of touchdowns one time, and I remember he broke Red Grange's touchdown record, a bunch of short touchdowns. This one here isn't like that. He was breaking big one after big one, averaging over 13 yards per carry. Let you know that all of them were pretty damn big. I mean, or anytime he touched the ball was big. But
those sound like high school stats for like a really top-notch
exactly,
high
a
school
top player.
Yeah.
Or like when Derrick Henry was playing, and he just ran into some sorry soul team, and he was averaging about a quarter football field.
Couldn't help but just run to daylight, right?
You know what I mean? I watched several of his games here in Jacksonville when he was playing high school ball, and come on, man. And there was only really one game I saw when he was really stopped, and then they took out the starters. They went to halftime. He had about 44 yards, and they went to halftime, and they kind of like put the backups in there for the second half, and he ended up getting 200 yards plus. Just ran right through him. They still lost, but that was the only time I saw a team really come after him. But he was doing wildcat. out of the back, everything. Coach didn't coach. He said left, right, keep it, Derek. Left, right, keep it, Derek. That's not coaching. And then there was another player, Tataroa McMillan from Arizona, another 300-yard receiving day, 10 catches, 304 yards. You're talking another one with 30 yards per carry average. Come on, man. This is what we're getting now. I don't know if it's bad coaching, great
video
players.
game numbers.
Yeah, or a combination of all of this. And this upcoming season, upcoming weekend, the games aren't going to be as great, but there are some kind of games that stand out. That Nebraska-Colorado game, in my opinion, it stands out, if nothing else, for the prime factor.
Yeah, I'm hyped for that game. I'm not sure what the vibe is in Lincoln, but I saw a quote from Coach Matt Rule, and he's saying, hey, be nice, Nebraska fans. So I don't know if there's some harsh feelings for prime time, or I don't know. Like I said, I'm not in Lincoln. I don't know what's going on, and I haven't really been on no Husker pages recently, so I don't know what's going on. But actually, there must be some talk somewhere that he's trying to get them to be respectful and be the classy Nebraska fans that they're known for being.
Yeah, as far as that goes, in terms of the players, they can't help but get up for it. These are young people who can't really keep in touch with their emotions. They read the stuff. They're on social media. This is the social media age. So they get a chance to go on and see them talked about all the time. And you're talking about a team that was 4-8 last season, and they're still being talked about as if they're just either defending champs or runner-ups. And they don't want to hear this anymore. So when the game gets closer, they'll try to keep it in. But once that game starts, I think it'll be a lot like what happened with Colorado State last year, when people just had this vitriol. Even though Colorado was a huge favorite as an in-state rivalry, Colorado State still got the cheap shot, like the one on Travis Hunter. Got the cheap shot in, and they just got too emotional for the game, and they just let it come out. The discipline just kind of had a breaking point. So I think even though Nebraska, and you know what, Nebraska is known for classy fans. This isn't just a Nebraska fan just saying it. These guys are known for having classy fans. I think it might have all started with Tom Osborne because he just kept that aura of class. But man, we're in a different age right now, and I think once they're out there on the field, and once you see Shador over there, and
Travis there, and it's a night game. It's a night game, so by the time people get to the stadium,
they get up, boys.
They could have
LSU boy.
They could have at least a 12-pack in them, or if not more. So, alcohol changes people's personalities sometimes. But hopefully the players themselves, they keep their composure. They don't buy into it. Like you mentioned, Colorado State and the cheap shot. I mean, Travis Hunter had taken at least 4 or 5 steps before the dude hit him, man. That was just
he put him out for games too.
Yeah.
His liver.
Yeah, that was jacked up, man. That was just a clear cheap shot. Probably one of the worst cheap shots I've ever seen on a football field. The dude had totally relaxed. The play was over.
And it threatened him too. And a lot of threats after
this
kid.
Him, yeah.
Deion stepped in. Coach probably had to step in, like, yo, okay, I understand, but this kid was emotional. He had to step in because this guy was getting death threats and people just making threats overall to him. So just the kid caught up in his emotions, man. Football is an emotional game. It's so physical and so traumatic, and it's still emotional. And these are still kids at the end of the day, 19-year-old kids up to 21-year-olds. Even with a COVID year, you're just 22, 23. But Nebraska, a 7-point favorite going into the game so far. I mean, the line hasn't moved. I think that's a steady line, and it needs to stay that. It might stay that way because I think that's what it should be. But I think Nebraska does have the upper hand, being at home, and people still looking at Colorado as a flukish kind of team because they're looking at an FCS team this past game, as opposed to now playing against a Nebraska team that's finally getting its recruits together. You have your coach in place, and you look like you have your future in place, and then you have the crowd behind you in a night game. Man, I mean, all things say that 7 points should stay 7 points.
Yeah, and I think looking at Coach Rule's history, his college teams usually take a big jump from the first year to the second year. And I think people are really expecting a big jump. I'm not saying playoffs, but maybe 8 to 9 wins and definitely a bowl game. So I think that's part of why they're favored by 7. Like people were just expecting them to be better this year.
Yeah, you know what? But then based on, like you said, we were talking off the air, and you was like, these are the kind of games we would have struggled with years ago. You know what I mean? Just recent years ago, they would have struggled against a team like UTEP. Probably pulled it off, but you'd have been probably pulling your hair out throughout the entire game, wondering why it wasn't a bigger margin. So this team looked like it's on the right trajectory. It looks like it does have the players. We've already talked about the recruits in the past of the kind of guys they're bringing in. And these aren't just transfer portal players. We're talking a grassroots effort to make this team what Nebraska football used to be. It wasn't, even though the transfer portal didn't exist back then, it wasn't really Nebraska just going out looking for other players who did have eligibility to come there. They still did it from the grassroots and from what was there. They didn't go out to the outside to just bring players in. And that's a lot of what's going on right now. So I'm rooting for them to beat Colorado. And it doesn't have anything to do with Coach Prime. I'm just rooting for them because, why wouldn't you like Nebraska unless they're playing your team? I don't have any problem with Nebraska. It's almost just a hell of a respect thing than just liking or hating them. It's a hell of a respect thing. It was something they've earned, I believe, from people throughout all of the years they've been playing football and kind of keeping a pretty good reputation. Hell, all college teams go through their BS, and they went through their nonsense, the Lawrence Phillips and all that crap. But generally speaking, the program has pretty much been an upstanding program if you wanted to compare and contrast with other teams who have been successful. I doubt there's been successful teams that have had choir boys all the time. Typically, that just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think going through the Riley and the Frost years, it's been 7 years since they've been to a bowl game, and things look like they're going in the right direction. They had some tough breaks last year. You could argue they should have gone to a bowl game last year. I don't think they had the right pieces because the quarterback couldn't catch snaps out of the shotgun, or he didn't. Maybe he was colorblind, kept throwing to the wrong team, and then they had to go with the freshman quarterback who was more of a runner. They had some challenges that they just didn't get to those 6 victories. But now, we talked about Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes, Lil Cuzzo, as he calls him.
Yeah.
They're expecting big things. Hopefully, if they lose, hopefully he's not the reason.
Yeah, you know what? And if they did lose and he is the reason, you can always fall back on, this is a true freshman. He's not supposed to do this kind of thing anyway. You're hoping for the best, and I think he has the ability to stay within the system, and he does have teammates who can help him. He does have more talented teammates now than whoever the quarterback was last year. And now
I think they're going to emphasize do not turn the ball over.
That's it.
Make sure you catch the snap. Make sure you're going through your progressions. You're reading correctly. And that was one thing. You're watching highlights of him. You can see him. He's looking left, looking right, going back to the middle. He knows how to read defenses, and he goes through his projections. So his kid's got a good head on his shoulders. His dad was a NFL lineman for like 13 years. Hard-nosed, badass. I
liked him when he was at college.
Yeah.
Was he an All-American? All-American coming out of Nebraska?
I don't know. I can't recall.
Then he played with Brendan Sty and those guys that were on that offensive line?
No, he came after those guys.
After Brendan Sty?
Yeah.
Okay, so but I know that he did play well.
Yeah, Brendan Sty was with like Zach Wiegert and those guys.
Zach Wiegert, yeah, it was Zach Wiegert. God, blast for the past names, man. But the Big Ten I think the SEC got better and stronger than what the Big Ten did so far. Because you look at Washington and you know that DeBoer has left there, and now as far as quarterback, Will Rogers came from Mississippi State to go up there, and they looked all right. But Oregon, once again, had a tougher game than they should have had, even though the stats say that they still dominated. But the score is what you're looking at. They're going to need to do better than that if they still want to stay at the number 2 spot. And they better be lucky that if someone wanted to be reasonable, they could drop them from that number 2 spot just based on that game. But they're not going to do that this early. They give everybody kind of a pass. Unless you freaking flat out lose, like a Michigan lose to the Appalachian State years ago. You got to get them out of there. You can't be up there.
Right.
But Alabama's a team we didn't talk about. There was a 34.5-point line in that game. And I was like, why? This game is probably going to score like 50 points. And the reason why, DeBoer, he's the guy who's a offensive mind, quarterback. He knows how to teach quarterbacks. We saw what he did with Michael Penix last year. I know Jalen Moreau is not going to be what Michael Penix is, but there was at one point he had completed like 3 passes and 2 of them were touchdowns. A third of his passes were touchdowns. He only completed 9 for 200 yards. A third of his passes were touchdowns, and they were completely dominant as they should have been. But he wanted to show, in my opinion, that this is all offense. If he does his job as hiring defensive guys who know how to handle defense, he can do exactly what Saban had done. Saban was a defensive-minded guy who hired the right offensive guys. Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, offensive guys who knew what the hell they were doing. He didn't get too much into what they were doing. Let them do their job. And you see they became head coaches. So if he's able to do that on the defensive side, you could have a lot of the same Alabama, even more potent offensively if there could be a case.
That could be a scary thing.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not even discounting Alabama. They're acting like they were supposed to be a step back this year. I think offensively they could be more creative. And even Ty Simpson got his opportunities. It wasn't as much, but he didn't need him as much, to put up the ridiculous numbers. He didn't get any touchdowns, but he got his game time in front of the huge crowd. Jalen Moreau did what he had done. The defense is still Alabama defense. They got the freaking shutout. So, but the 34 and a half.
Plus, coming off of last year, Moreau had improved so much down the stretch.
Yep.
He's got to be that much more confident going into this season. I know he's gonna be a better player this season than he was last year.
He's a Heisman Trophy candidate.
That makes the Crimson Tide very dangerous.
And he has a coach that can spend more time with him offensively and continue to give him that offensive tutelage he needs, because he said, hey, I know how to run already. He said it last year. I want to really put an emphasis on being able to know how to pass and become a better passer. And that's what he's been doing. And if that continues with this offensive-minded coach, if he's willing to learn and he can't pick up what's being put down, he could be that quarterback. I mean, you have a litany of quarterbacks this year, and almost all the time in the Heisman Trophy candidacy, that have a real opportunity. I'm still a little bit hard on Carson Beck, but I think he'll eventually come around once he has his other piece in Trevor Etienne coming back. He'll be a little bit more pressure off of him. Now you have Frazier and Etienne, another issue for everybody else. And now he has receivers. Yeah, he's certainly going to be able to get it together. I just hope to see more improvement against better teams when he does it. But in any event, that probably puts a lid on it for college football, because there's still a little bit of other things that need to be talked about. I guess the Caitlin Clark effect is still out there. Bro, nothing else. I don't have an Indiana jersey on for nothing. Let's talk about Caitlin for 5 seconds.
Hey, not only Caitlin, she's really elevated her game since the Olympic break, and I expected that.
Kelsey Mitchell.
Let her get some rest, and she got the rest, and now she's really balling at a high level. But shout out to Kelsey Mitchell. She's balling.
Bro, is she?
And she's even more aggressive than Caitlin Clark is, I think.
And she's a shooting guard.
Yeah, sometimes her shot selection is a little bit questionable. Like, she don't care. She gets her jack on. But she's been balling. She had a 30-some point game, 29-point game. The Fever are dangerous, man. They are very dangerous right now. And, I didn't even mention Aaliyah Boston, last year's Rookie of the Year. She can get boards and put up a 20-piece on people. She's very talented, putting the ball in the basket. She has offensive skills. And then you talk about Lexi Hull just floating around the perimeter waiting to snipe.
Waiting for a snipe, bro.
Right. She can shoot it. They're very, very dangerous. Coming down the stretch, looking at potential playoff matchups. But I feel the need. I have to give a shout out. I don't know what the broadcast, what channel it was, but props to whoever it was for removing that bitch Cheryl Swoops and putting in Nancy Lieberman.
Yes.
Yeah. Get that bitch off the broadcast.
Bro, that bigot, racist, jealous. I mean, come on, just keep on. And I don't know why there are people still defending her. I know why. That's part of being the tribe. You defend nonsense just because they kind of look like you. But nevertheless, I'm glad she was off the broadcast. And it was a conscious effort to get her off. She has just this one agenda, and it's just Caitlin Clark. She wants to crap on her every chance she gets, and she does it if you allow her to do it. You could probably tell her in the back, but she'll still come out in the front and just can't help herself. Like the other day when she mentioned all those players and she completely ignored and left off Caitlin Clark. Come on, man. I mean, it's so deliberate, and I don't know what it is just with her. Well, it's not even just with her. It's a couple of them. It's just that she seems to be the most blatant and most unapologetic about what she's doing.
Right. And she started off with a bunch of lies, and rather than saying, you know what, I was misinformed,
Liars don't
just
care.
just owning up to your mistake. No, she said it's not. I'm not racist. I have white friends. I grew up with white. I mean, that's what racists say.
That's what the
That's what
racists say.
white racists say. I can't be racist. I have black friends. Man, that's like page one of the playbook for racists. Come on,
That's
man,
free
fuck out of
camp.
here.
Yep, but I'm glad she's off of that, man. And as you mentioned, when it comes to the FIFA playing the way they play, I mean, you're talking they're beating some of the quality teams, and if not, they've beaten all the quality teams so far. They've already they've beaten the Liberty already. They've beaten the Suns already. Didn't they beat the Lynx?
They made it up to the 6th seed right now.
Yeah, their first time over 500 since what 2019,
something like that,
somewhere around there. I'm like, bro, they've been bad for a long time. You're telling me this isn't the common denominator here?
Right.
Come
And
on now.
it's not all Caitlin. You know, people are
I know,
saying
but this is the
that,
common
wait, no,
denominator.
wait.
Without her, they're not even in
People
this
are
spot.
saying they have talent on the team. They do have talent on the team. But last year they were trash with that same talent. And now you're seeing Caitlin Clark's effect on the other team. You know, I spoke about a couple weeks ago. You start to see the Steph Curry gravity effect. You know,
Yeah.
people are gravitating to Caitlin Clark because she started knocking down her threes, or she's driving, and that's leaving Lexi Hull open. Now you're seeing her teammates getting in on the act. Caitlin throws a long court pass to Kelsey, and she drops a dime behind her back for an easy layup. You know, now Kelsey Mitchell's dropping dimes, and she wasn't doing that before. So, you know, they're playing it as a unit. There's more cohesion, and the Caitlin Clark effect has rubbed off. Kelsey Mitchell wasn't dropping behind the back dimes before.
Nah. You know, I'm looking at some of the stats, and you don't want to get too deep into the stats because you can watch the game and see exactly how it happens. But when you look at a plus minus when it comes to a basketball player, sometimes it's completely trivial. It doesn't mean much of anything. But when you see the effect that Caitlin Clark does have on the game, and she has a higher plus minus than what Kelsey Mitchell has. When Kelsey Mitchell scored 36, Caitlin had 29, 28. You know, you're like wondering how is that? But then you look at the assist, which also goes into it, and what she had the impact on the game, and you see why the plus minus is higher for her than it would be for Kelsey. But between the both of them, a dynamic duo. And then now you're going to have a triumvirate because you know Boston's going to come back to get back to her regular play. If she's not getting points, she's still getting rebounds. No one talks about her rebounds because she's not being one of these stat freaks that wants to just get rebounds or double doubles. She's just doing what she needs to help out her team, and we could see the difference in players who are interested in winning and going and upsetting teams and working as a team to get those wins, as opposed to the team that's getting all these individual awards, and you can see the losses becoming more and more and more with each passing game. That's the difference between the two. I don't even know why it would even be a point of contention between who should be the rookie of the year and seriously consideration for some MVP votes. Now, she won't win the MVP, but I think she could at least be in the top 5 or 4 of the MVPs in this conversation this season, Caitlin Clark.
So the first time you mentioned it, I was like, nah. But then, like, I believe it was the next week, you know, they won a couple of games. I said, you know, if they get up to like number 6, or if they could get to number 5, like, that's a huge jump from number one pick in the draft, missing the playoffs. Yep. Now you're the 5 seed, and she got them to 6. They're at number 6 right now. I don't know if they'll make 5. I don't know how many games are left. I think they're a couple games behind 5. I don't know if they'll get to 5, but man, if they get to 5, and you look everything, put everything in perspective, that gauntlet early in the season they had to go to the back-to-backs. It was like 5 games in 9 days, 9 nights, whatever. It was ridiculous, and they came out of that. Yeah, they had a losing record, but now they're above 500. They're beating top tier teams. Like they're rolling right now. And the good thing, if you're an Indiana fan, is you see them having fun. They're enjoying playing the game. They
Yep.
enjoy playing with each other. Man, they're going to be a problem this year and years going forward. Knock on wood, as long as everybody stays healthy.
Yeah, and I don't know how their free agency goes and how players would want to come play with her, or they that pissed off that they wouldn't even come play with her because it's her. I'm thinking that some of these people would be better off if they decide to come to her team and play with her. I think they could be pissed off from a distance, but if they see the opportunity that's going to help their overall game, that would be a reason why they may come over in free agency. So I guess that may be how it works. But either way, right now, they're just getting hot at the right time, and these are the teams that are the biggest pain in the butts. But they've been built for this kind of momentum right now because of that early schedule when they were grinding it out against everybody, trying to figure themselves out. They now have gotten to that point. And in the second half of the season, after the Olympics, now they're playing like one of the best teams. I think, what is it? The Las Vegas Aces, they're 7-1, the best record coming off of the break. But I think it maybe the Fever is like number 2 or 3. So they're almost just as hot. And we can see that, the winning streak they're on and the way they're playing, the cohesion they have, and seeing leaders just become more outwardly transfixed on this team as the season's going on. I know Caitlin Clark is going to get all the credit, but man, look at the players on this team. Aaliyah Boston, rookie of the year last year, even when she's not getting her points, she's getting the rebounds, doing the grunt work, and making it even easier for as easy, relatively speaking, as possible for Caitlin Clark to be able to have those open shots that she get when they decide to collapse down for a split second on Boston and she kicks it out.
Yeah, speaking of rebounds, they played the Sky last Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were down 25 with like 4 minutes to go. And guess who was still in the game because she didn't have a double-double?
Yep. Trash.
Angel Reese. She had
Trash.
7 points. 7 points, and she had to stay in the game in garbage time. Indiana had cleared the bench. It was definitely garbage time, and she stayed in just to get her double-double. And damn, if she almost didn't get it. She had to. It was like the final minute before she even got to her 10th point.
And I bet she was happy as hell when she got it.
Because that's all she's about. She didn't care that they ended up losing by 19. Oh, got my double-double. I'm the all-time leader for double-double.
Yep, that's it. That's the mentality she has.
Bravo.
The mentality that tribal mindset has. It's all about them. They act like they care about other things. No, you care about you. You care about how you can be seen more.
She made rebounding great again. Bravo. But the game of basketball is about putting the ball in the hoop.
And that's true. And I know people came up with the analogies already. Yeah, give Rodman the MVPs and not MJ. You know what I mean? And that never happened. One guy was like, you remember when Rodman got the MVP and not MJ? Yeah, neither do I. Exactly. This is exactly why it should be the case with the rookie of the year.
But to make it worse, like I like Angel, but every day it's like a little less and a little less and a little less. She's saying she's crying about the referees that Caitlin Clark gets all the calls. Since when? Since when does Caitlin Clark get all the calls? You lost by 19. It wasn't the referees.
And you were losing by as much as 27 at one point. I mean, come on now.
Because I was questioning, are you going to talk this time? Because the first time they got beat, she refused to speak to the media. And then when they won, I'm a dog. This is what I'm about, blah, blah. And now you lose by 19. And what are you going to say now? Oh, there was the referees. Got it. Come on, Angel. And you start your podcast and you're whining. Come on, you got your ass beat. Take your L and shut the fuck up.
There's more that came from. And on that note, let's shut this damn thing down, man. We had a pretty damn good loaded show based on college football for the most part because of all the college football that was played this past weekend. The NFL is coming up on Thursday, and we are sure to give you our picks of who should be the participants in the Super Bowl. AFC champs, NFC champs. We're talking rookie of the year offensively, rookie of the year defensively, and the same for the overall in the NFL offense and defense. We'll get around to all that on Thursday. So if you want to join us, come ahead and do that. Of course, we want you to do that. He's biased. I'm Trav, and the Sports Bad Bros podcast will be back at you on Thursday. But until then, deuces.
Peace.